Where am I? Nothing. How did I get here? Nothing. Who brought me here? Nothing. Who am I? He had long gray hair and a beard. He was wearing a light gray shirt, dark blue dress slacks, and black loafers. He was sitting on a kitchen chair, a plain varnished wood ladder-back chair, the kind you would find around any kitchen table. He looked around him and saw nothing. A flat, featureless landscape without interruption as far as he could see. It merged seamlessly with the pale blue, cloudless sky. There was no sun, no single source of light. Everything was well lit. There were no shadows. What is this place, he wondered. Where am I? He repeated the question. He stood and scanned the horizon again. There were no distant mountains, no trees, stones, nothing his eyes could focus on. He walked around the chair slowly, the fine gravel and sand crunching beneath his feet. He listened. Nothing. No birds or insects, no breeze. It was absolutely still. He sniffed the air. Nothing. No scent of any kind. He walked a few steps away from the chair and studied it. It was just a chair, nothing special about it. How had it gotten here? Had they brought it here when they had brought him? Or was it already here? He went back and sat down, staring at the horizon. How far might it be? There was something about the curvature of the earth, but he couldn't recall it. How long would it take to get? Where? There was nothing out there, nowhere to walk to. If he started walking, how long could he go on? What would he find? More of the same? This was nowhere, the middle of nowhere. He closed his eyes, and after a while, he slept. Nothing. He did not know how long he had slept, but when he opened his eyes, he saw nothing. Pitch black nothingness enveloped him. No moon, no stars, no faint glimmer of dawn on the horizon. Nothing. He closed his eyes and opened them again. He moved his hand in front of his face. No sight, no sound, no scent or sensation. This was the middle of nothing. He closed his eyes against the dark and slept. He awoke to the same blue sky, the same endless horizon. It made no sense. How had he come to be here? He could not recall having been brought here. He had no idea who might have brought him here. Why had he been brought here? What purpose was served? He stood and walked around the chair. He tried to make his eyes see further. He strained his ears for the slightest sound. He walked a few steps in one direction, turned and walked a few more, and continued until he had walked around the chair 3 times. At least when he was walking, there was the sound of his shoes on the gravel, the illusion of doing something. He sat back down. I should leave here, he thought. There is nothing here in the middle of nowhere. It makes no sense to remain. He looked around and realized it made no difference which way he went. He stood up and started walking. He walked perhaps 25 or 30 paces and stopped. Turning around, he looked back at the chair. It was, in a sense, all he had. Should he leave it behind? He walked back, picked it up, and set out again, this time following his own footprints until they ran out, and continued on in the same direction. At first he walked in silence, broken only by the sound of his shoes on the gravel and sand. but then he started to hum quietly. He didn't recall any particular song or melody. He unconsciously adapted the rhythm to his steps. Somehow, it comforted him as he walked away from the middle of nowhere. He had no way to measure time, so he had no idea how long he had been walking when the light went out, almost as if a switch had been thrown. He stopped and put the chair down and sat. He closed his eyes and slept. He woke once in the dark with a clear question in his mind. Why am I not hungry or thirsty? When next he awoke, there was light, so picking up his chair, he started walking again. After a while, he knew not how long, he realized he was looking out over a long, steep decline. He had not seen it coming, and he stopped and looked down the slope. At the bottom there appeared to be a mist or a fog. There were no discernible features except that, towards the bottom, there was a hint of green. He started walking down the hill more slowly, as he was uncertain what lay beneath the mist. He heard himself humming to the rhythm of his crunching steps, but gradually the crunching gave way to a softer, less gritty sound. As he entered the mist, he slowed even more, and the sound of his steps disappeared completely. The ground beneath his feet became softer, bouncier, and then he was standing at the edge of a pond, or possibly a lake. He couldn't be sure, because he could not see far in any direction except that the other side was faintly visible. He put down his chair and sat on it for a short moment, and then he rose and bent down over the water. Cupping his hands, he scooped up some of the water and sniffed it. It was clear, cold, and odorless. He drank and scooped and drank again, and again. He washed his face and the back of his neck, and the cold water cleaned and refreshed him. Looking around at his surroundings, he saw that the banks of the pond were lined with bushes and low shrubs. One attracted his attention. It appeared there were small red berries amongst the green leaves. He went to it and picked a few of the berries. He ate one and found it to be sweet and a bit tangy. He ate the rest and then picked more. Sitting on the ground by the bush, he began to eat the berries one after the other, and then by the handful. Before long, he had picked the bush clean. He stood and went to the next bush, but the berries were smaller and whitish, obviously not ripe. He moved on to the next bush, and then the next. He went quite a ways around the pond before he found another bush with ripe berries, and he ate many of them. While he had been busy finding and eating the berries, he had not noticed that the mist had lifted, revealing now clearly that he was indeed at a pond, which was fed by a slow bubbling spring a bit further along. He saw that he was almost halfway around the pond. He could see his chair, and seeing it, he felt reassured for some reason. Looking up the slope, he saw that it was covered by a thick carpet of grasses and wild flowers. He walked the rest of the way around the pond, and, back at his chair, he sat down and stared at the pond and across it to the grass-covered slope on the opposite side. The grass on the far side was, indeed, greener. He picked up his chair and walked around to the other side. Finding a place where the grass was thick, he set down the chair and then, instead of sitting on it, he lay down on the cool green grass. He stared up at the featureless sky for a while and then closed his eyes and slept. Once during the nothingness he awoke. He could hear the spring burbling and feel the grass with his hand. He breathed in the scent of the grass and the water. There was something in the nothingness. When next he opened his eyes, it was light again. He sat up and looked around. He thought, I was in the middle of nowhere, and now I am here. There is the grass, the bushes, with their berries, and the cool water in the pond. I am somewhere.